Hi and welcome to today's video. In today's video we'll discuss about basics of photography and videography. Now if you go around searching on the internet about basics of photography and videography, mostly the things that you'll come across will be the exposure triangles, how aperture works, how shutter speed works. Well, those are not basics of photography. Those are the technicalities of photography, the technical know-how. The basics of photography starts with light. If you study photography from its roots, something that you'll figure out that photography is all about light. I'm not talking about the lighting for photography like Rembrandt lighting or top lighting or bottom lit. No, those are the lighting you do in studio or in movie sets. That is, it has its purpose and it is very important. The role of lighting in photography and videography that I'm talking about is not outside the camera. It's through and inside the camera. Few years back, I came across a documentary in which there was an experiment done. The experiment is called as Camera Obscura experiment. Now, what is that? They had covered the entire house and everything, black tapes, black curtains, and they had completely stopped any light entering the house. And in the end, they will cut a small hole through that black tape on the front window, just a small hole that will let the light enter, and what it'll do is that it'll create an inverted picture of the scenery outside the window on the front wall. So basically through the aperture, through the pinhole which acts as an aperture, we'll come to that, it'll project the picture on the other side of the wall. Project the picture. Does it sound familiar? So the things happening inside the camera, it's ironically it's a bit similar to the things that happen for you to watch the movie in the movie hall. So it's a bit similar through the lens, which helps angle the light in a way you see the clear picture. Similarly in photography, the lens adjusts the light to hit it at certain point on the sensor. That's how photography or videography basically works. The technicalities have changed, there have been a lot of advancements, but the basic remains the same. Now we come to the technicalities of photography. The basic parameters you need to learn if you want to start photography or videography. And you might have heard about this at many places. I'll try to make it as simple as possible and explain it in my way, the way I have understood them. So to start with, first thing I've already mentioned it's an aperture. Now what is an aperture? Aperture is an aperture blade, or you can say iris on the camera's lens that opens to let the light in from the lens and reach to the camera. If you go back and see the camera obscura experiment, what is aperture in it? The hole that was cut out so that light comes in. Now aperture in camera decides few things. One, it decides how much of light will come in, how bright your image will be, and it's defined in f-stop. Now f-stop is different stops at which it opens, and at each stop you lose about half of the light. Aperture defines one more thing, that is how much of depth of field you'll get, how much of depth blur you'll get, and also it decides the bokeh. Now how does it affect those? We'll learn one by one. First, how does it affect the depth of field? So what does your camera do is when you fix the focus of your camera lens, you will understand it's better if you're using a camera. The same principle also applies in a mobile photography and videography, but it won't be that evident for you to study it. So when you define the focus of the camera, what you basically define is at what angle the light will hit the camera. Now when you're wide open, like when you have 1.8 aperture, assumptively if it's the maximum on your camera, so at f1.8 your aperture blade will be wide open and there'll be too much of light hitting at different angles. So what this focus do is defines what part of the image will hit the sensor in a certain way for it to be focused. Now other part of the images, other object near or far from that place will hit camera at certain offset, and that will make it blurred or defocus. So that's how it affects the focus of the image. Now, yes, the focus of the image is defined in f-stop. As I said earlier, f-stops are different stops. Like sometimes it's 1.8, 1.8, then 2.2, 2.8, and something like that. These are the different stops how your aperture blade opens. So at every stop you lose a half of your light. So your image will be darker but sharp, because at a smaller pinhole you will have light entering and hitting the sensor almost parallel. It will directly hit the sensor, and everything that comes to that pinhole. So it'll all be sharp. It'll be darker, but it'll be sharper. But when you open that iris a bit more, like this, when you open the iris a bit more, there'll be too much of light coming in, and you'll have to decide your point of focus. I hope that's clear by now. Now, we studied aperture, but the aperture decides how much of light will be allowed from the lens. Aperture will decide how much of light is let in by from the lens. But from camera, there is also one more control that decides how much of light will hit the sensor. And that control is called as shutter speed. Shutter speed earlier used to be a mechanism that will come from the side, block the light and go away. So that decides how much of light is allowed inside the camera to hit the sensor. But nowadays camera have become so fast to capture the moving images, moving objects, that you don't have one curtain, you now have two curtains. So when you press your shutter, depending on your shutter speed is defined in seconds. Like if you define 1 second, 2 second, or one half of the second, or 300 or 400 or 800 of the seconds will go. So if you choose, for example, 1 second shutter speed, so shutter will move really fast. There will be one curtain that will go in this way, and then the other curtain will go. So it will capture a lot of light. So if you observe, if you have a very long shutter speed, you will see some kind of blur in your images, because camera is taking too much time to allow more light, that if you have any movement happening, the entire movement will be captured and it will get blurred. So that's how shutter speed affects. It defines how sharper your image will get. It also defines how much of motion blur you will get. To give you another example, when you're shooting in interiors or interior lights, sometimes if your shutter speed is high in your video, you will see flickers coming. Why? Because your shutter is moving too fast. It's faster than the light, so not entire light is being captured. That's why you'll see flickers. And this is the reason for the flickers, because your shutter speed is too fast. Talked about aperture, shutter speed. Third parameter is ISO. It's a shutter sensitivity or shutter gain, you can say. So for example, we will understand with the help of audio. For example, you have recorded some sound in your mic and you are not able to listen to clear video. What you do? You up the gain or volume. You're able to hear the audio clearly, but at the same time, you will hear also a lot of noise, because you have entirely pulled up the gain. So similarly, when you have no other way to increase the light, for example, you're shooting at a night time, so what you can do, you can up the ISO. But just like in audio, when you up the ISO, it will also increase the noise in the image. It's a misconception that ISO increases the noise in the image. Actually, ISO does not increase the noise in the image. It's the lack of light that increases the noise in the image, because you are trying to pull the information of whatever you have in the image. So these are the few parameters. ISO, this defines the exposure triangle. ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. Now there are a few more important parameters. For example, white balance. Now what is white balance? For example, you are shooting in the disco or some interior space where it's lit with colored lights. You will immediately understand that okay, there is a color, so everything you see has a certain tint added to it. Camera doesn't understand it. So you have to define, in whatever environment you are, you have to define the neutral gray or white for it. It is. You have to define, okay, this wall is white, but because the environment is looking gray, so that's that is setting a white balance. So when you'll try setting your white balance, you will understand that okay, now camera is recognizing, and according to that color it is neutralizing the environment, and there's no heavy influence of any light on it. So yeah, that's how white balance works. Now there are also other parameters like HDR, the high dynamic range of the camera, uh, how the lens works, what is focusing, and what are the other tools you need to go ahead with photography and videography. We'll discuss then in the videos ahead. So I hope you liked the video and you find it informative. If it helped you, give it a like and share it with your friends and family. And thank you for watching my video.